Hello, it's Writing Wednesday, and I'm taking your questions here on a beautiful June morning. It is about a month till my book comes out, Chimes of Lost Cathedral, the second of the Marina M. books. And I'm writing a couple of short stories in between, and this is what I was hoping to do between starting a novel, ending a novel, and figuring out what to do next. Short stories, as I've advised countless times, super good way to get your open the doors of possibility again, rather than just jumping from one novel into another novel just because you're used to writing. To investigate what else to write about. And I'm taking questions, so if you think of any questions that you would like answered today. But let's start with, I have a question from Susan, who asked this question. You probably can figure that I aspire to write. Love words, love what they can do. They make me feel passionate and alive. Uh, I I know I can write, that I have potential. My problem is I have no ideas. None. There's nothing I want to do more than write a story. Not a hey Chris, not a bestseller or even a powerful story, just one where the readers want to turn the page. But I have no ideas. Nothing original comes to me. Well, this is very interesting. How do I overcome this? Okay. How do I overcome not having any ideas? Well, every single writer, when they finished a story, or especially a novel, has no ideas left. Just none. You feel like, oh, I don't know what if I ever have another idea again as long as I live. And there's always this, like, what should I be writing about? The thing to remember is that, so Susan, as you're getting started, this is not an unfamiliar feeling for writers. It's just like, what do I write about? And the thing to remember is that you have an incredible store of ideas and abilities and observations. You've heard a billion stories of other people that have hit you in a certain way, that there's something about them that intrigues you. I think that this is about, like, where do I get my ideas? I don't have any ideas. I want to write something. I have no ideas. So hi, Davis students. Very cool. Nice to see you. How do I start? This woman wrote in, Susan, I hope you're there, who says she has no ideas. Nothing original comes to her. The thing is that, as Annie Dillard said, the self is the bearer of the paint box of its inherited contents of obsessions and fascinations. So you yourself are a reservoir of a lifetime of fascinations and obsessions. And what one needs to do is somehow kind of open up that well, that you can find the things that you're made of. You cannot, you'll write whatever you want to write about. You'll end up writing about those materials if you're writing down into yourself, if you're writing out of who you are and what interests you. You just have to notice what interests you, what draws you, what pops the cork, and then the handkerchiefs will start coming out. So a lot of it is just getting the corner of the handkerchief, of the first one, to find what that could be. Now, I have a little coin purse, a little pouch that I cannot find. I don't know what I did with it. It's somewhere in this this. It's somewhere in here. And I can find it, I think, if I, really cleaned up. Where I've taken words. Usually it's a word that's a verb and a noun, like light, like chair. And I've filled this little coin purse with words. I just made a big list and then cut them up and then close my eyes and reach in, pull one out. And there it is, wind, chair. And I write down a list of associations that has for me. What kind of chair is intriguing for me, say, or chairing a meeting, or all the different meanings it has for me. And then I pick the one that resonates, seems the most interesting to me. And I'll write 2 pages double spaced using that word somewhere in the story. So that's my word exercise. My students all do it. If I teach a 16-week class, they'd have 16 of these little shorts. And some of them would become larger stories, and some of them eventually become novels. So I cannot recommend the short word exercise more strongly. And sometimes you take something that doesn't pan out, what are you out? An hour or 2. So I recommend that. Another way to, you're always looking to access this material that's already in. You already have a personality. You already have an opinion. You already have, decades, if you're over 10, a couple of decades of experience living on planet Earth. You have your own obsessions and fascinations. It's just finding them, bringing it to the surface. Another thing that I always do is when I get an idea for a story, or I see something that catches my attention, I put in a notebook. So when I don't know what to write about, I have a billion things in here that really attracts me. Ideas that really attract me. There is a room in my house I always keep locked. Are we the slaves of our stories? The doppelganger, the sharing economy, the squat years later. A time when poverty is considered a permissible reason for assisted suicide, and people are encouraged to kill themselves so that only the rich remain. And having a book like this, you'll never be at a loss for something to write. Not all of them will appeal to you 6 months later, a year later, but something will. Hey, I'm answering, Alicia, I'm answering your question next. Hi. So I say, definitely keep track of when you get a flash, somebody's told you an interesting story, you get a flash of an idea, just the little edge of a handkerchief, pull it out. I suggest the word exercise. Another thing I do often is work with photographs. You think your way into the photograph. And this is a wonderful thing to do. I often use photographs when I'm writing of people who will stand in for my character, so I can really look at them and see how light falls on them. But sometimes just a situation and I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see what I can see, and I'm not the most stable of personalities here, but I will try. Okay, so for example, this is a book that I have a lot of photographic books, and this is Cindy Sherman's Untitled Film Stills. So she creates a situation that might be a scene in a film that doesn't exist. And I find these so evocative that each one of them seems to have a story attached to them. Like this is one that I want to write the short story. This woman in the hallway. So it's like, who is she? who is inside that room? Where is this hall? There's a period to it. There's a feel to it. Who is she and why is she in that doorway? Whose doorway is that? Could be it could be she's been locked out. It could be her lovers. It could be her husband. It could be, um, a sister who doesn't want to speak to her anymore. Could be a lot of people. I love this book. Here's another one that I've always wanted to write about, is this woman. She's she's a housewife in a very small kitchen. And I just see her like, this is a woman who's about to poison her husband, if you ask me. But it's a whole book of women that she, stories that she has imagined, That's her sort of Sophia Loren kind of person, So anyway, it's all very evocative, and I would love to write some of those stories using photographs and just writing your way in. Here's another one. Say it's a photo book I just love called Flashing on the 60s by Lisa Law. And you write your way in. It's like, here's a bunch of groovy people on the bus, probably at a concert or some kind of a gathering. And you know what? You could pick someone in this scene to be. Like, look at these kind of square people, It's like he wanted to go on the date. She's like, I don't know, these people seem awfully weird. Wouldn't it be fun to write from her point of view? Or be on the bus, be, I call this legend in her own mind. This girl just has it going. What's it like to be up there on the bus? Are you, there's a photographer. Who's that? So you can be anybody in this and write this scene from their point of view and really try to imagine what it would have been like to be there. I think that was a be-in. Then here's a demonstration. This gives you the 60s. I can be someone on that truck. I like this. Maybe I'm the one with the garbage can lid shield. Maybe I'm driving the bus. Then, I come in from the East Bay for the day. Oh, let's go to the demonstration. There are all kinds of people at this thing. So you write your way into photographs. Here's a great one. It's like, who's this guy? Can I get it to focus? Maybe not. Who's this guy? Kevin at the be-in, and he's holding hands with people. And, where is he now? There's a lot of different stories in these photographs. Here's the classic Hippie Bus. Who is this girl? Where is she now? Did she come with this guy? Did she meet him there? What's the story? Who are these people? Is there a responsible party anywhere? I don't see one. But you could be anywhere in that. You could be anyone in that scene. Maybe it's very hard to picture in your mind, sitting in your room by yourself. But to use a book, you can write your way into the photograph and be there. God, look at that great harlequin. I remember my harlequin, my harlequin jumpsuit. That was awesome that day. So this is a good 60s book. So I collect books of photography. There is a wonderful artist named Sophie Kai, or Kahl. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's French. She's a French photographer. And I have used her work before. Calle. There it is. Sophie Kai. and she's she's more of a performance artist. And one of her performances was she hired a detective to follow her around and report as if, um, he doesn't know that she's hired him. So he's reporting on the subject, and then there's on the other side is text saying, met my father for lunch. Subject meets, man in 50s wearing blah blah blah. They have a serious conversation. Met my dad, and I used that in Painted Black. The the mother hires a photographer to follow the protagonist around, and then the protagonist knows the story behind those photographs. This is a project that Sophie Kai did that I loved, where she is a hotel maid, and as she's cleaning, she's taking photographs of how people alter the room, how their presence altered the room. And I wrote a story about a Russian exile working as a hotel maid in 1923 in Los Angeles, because I found this so fascinating, how the human being alters this a kind of a standardized space, and thinks about who are these people, from the maids, like what does she see, in like that. There's the room set up, and then here's what people do to it. Sometimes they drag the mattress off, and that was the book that became Marina M. when I actually started writing it. So use photographs. If you don't have an idea, pick a photograph and write your way into it. I have books on crime photographs, big books. I have a big book on like 50s crime scenes, and you really can write your way into those. Here's one that I always liked. It's a book about, they're all men, of course, so it's people who use their wives as models, called The Model Wife. And it's 5 photographers, including Edward Weston, who's a great favorite of mine. And this is a Weston photograph of Cheris pretty late in their relationship. And to me, this is such a suggestive photograph of who is this? Where is this? When is this? What's the mood? What's the relationship? I look at a photograph like this, and I think of, that I'm in Greenwich Village in the 50s, the Beat era. Look at how narrow that bed is, living with my artist or writer boyfriend. And I don't think things are going very well. And this would just it's so evocative of time and place. So I could write myself into that photograph really well. So I would urge people who, are writing things or are ready to write, have no idea what they want to write. Don't panic. Don't think that, there's something wrong with that. This is writing. When I finish a novel, believe me, I am like right back there. It's like, what the heck am I going to write about? Luckily, right now, I'm working on a noir story and a sci-fi story. I was invited to participate in a couple of anthologies, which is really fun. I'm sorry that if you're starting out, people aren't asking you to write a story for something. But it's the same deal, except that your genre is being proposed in a location often is being proposed. So I'm writing a noir story, and I'm finding that it's going to be about it's going to have a real estate scam in it. So here I am doing research about real estate scams. And then I realize, oh yeah, that's very much a part of noir. Guess what? I love noir. I have a fascination, a passion, an obsession with noir. And you notice that probably a lot of my, if you read my stuff, you'll see a noir streak in there. I do believe the world is pretty harsh, but I do have that dark romanticism that is very much a part of noir, my kind of noir. Genre, you can pick a genre. The sci-fi one, I was, was able to choose an illustration from an old sci-fi thing and write about. And it gave me all kinds of ideas. So the idea is to give yourself a prompt. Let yourself have a prompt. There are books that are just nothing but writing prompts. Here's one, the Writer's Idea book. That was I got that one a long time ago. That's a Writer's Digest book. So work from a prompt and don't panic that the fact that nothing original comes to you right off the bat and then you panic. It's not that you're not original. It's that is writing. Is that at first you don't know what in the world do I have to say about the world? You have to find that little corner of yourself that you can start pulling out by using a prompt. Chekhov was asked, what are you going to write about next? And he picked up an ashtray off his desk and he said, maybe I'll write about this next. And that wasn't facetious. That was saying he'll use the ashtray to start linking to his obsessions and fascinations and start pulling the handkerchief out. So another question Alicia asked, now you're here, so you can ask, I'll get you in person. In my book, the journalist narrator interviews someone in a bar. It takes the entire chapter. How do I use quotes for the dialogue? Do I need quotes at all? Can I switch to third person and retell it in her words as though it's coming from him? Okay, so how do you do this? So you have a long scene with two people. Say your journalist is your point of view character is I, and they're having a live scene with somebody, an interview describing something. I don't see why you would have to switch points of view. Some people use quotation marks, if that's what you mean by quotes. Quotes. Some people use quotation marks, and some people don't. If it's clear who it is, if it's clear that it's spoken word, doesn't matter. How much of it is in direct conversation versus how much of it is narrated by the I character is up to you. When you're going to have somebody's going to tell a story. If you do it in direct address, as a live quotation, as live dialogue, make sure to break it up with the waiter coming and bringing some wine, or characters having internal thoughts, landscape keeps going, all the things we talked about in dialogue scene. This is a dialogue scene. And what's very important is to have the internals of the protagonist, of the point of view character, her reaction to what's being said. So it's not just the story, it's also reaction. But I think that if too much narration in a live scene, you can use it to shorten up. You get the glasses, he continued, describing blah, 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 and then you can get back into the dialogue. The dialogue is in the case of somebody telling a story, you're going to want to compress as much as possible. It's not Lord Jim, it's going to be very hard to do a 19th century long story being told, but I'd break it up, use internals, do some narrative, and some spoken. Always observe the gestures and voice of the other person, what they're doing. And I think that mixing it up will help a lot. All right, so we have some more questions. I'm going to have to scroll back here because it's all on my phone. Okay. So where do you start? Idea or character? Usually for me, I start with some kind of an image, and I go right for character. So it's like looking at that woman in the bed with her hands on the windowsill and the blinds. I look at a photograph like that, I said, who is that? Who is that? What's the mood? What's going on? That's how I think of things. So I rarely start with an idea. If I have an idea, I am quick to let it go when actual things start happening. I had a wonderful writing colleague, a man named Les Plesko, wonderful novelist. Definitely recommend reading him if you get a chance, who taught for 20 years at UCLA, and he always said, don't have ideas, which is hilarious because how can you not have ideas while you're writing? But what he meant was, don't cling to the idea when the living thing starts, when the handkerchiefs start coming out. Don't say, well, that's not what I plan to do. Let that go. Let that go, what you wanted to do. Let that go when things are really start to catch fire. Let's see, there's another one up in here. I have too many ideas. I get overwhelmed. Okay, so again, you pick an idea, you start working on it, stuff starts coming out. That's where forget the ideas and notice what is actually taking place, because the ideas are just starting places. You want the feeling, you want where it starts to bring up your own fascinations and obsessions, history, stuff like that. That's what you're looking for. You're trying to stimulate that. Here's one. Hi, Elizabeth. Will you share your short stories, or will you keep them in the archives until they might come to life in a novel? No, these were for two anthologies, so they are definitely coming out. Which is good because it puts a clock on my getting it done. Sometimes I'm not big on contests. I tend not to win them. I'm just not a contest person. I tend to, when I was younger, I would hold my breath to see what would happen with the, whether I got it, instead of sending the story out over and over again. But the one good thing about doing some kind of a contest or application is that it gives you a deadline, puts a clock on it. So if you can put a clock on your own short stories, that's they're not done until they're out. Let's see what we got. I have another. I wanted to. Oh, here we go. Hi, Susan. You said the hotel photos was where you started your story with Marina M. Is it not intimidating to go from that point in this instance to Russian history and language? Well, first I wrote that short story about her as a hotel maid, and then I tried to expand that story into a novel and realized I didn't know enough about her to write her in the 20s. I mean, I could as a short story, but not as a novel. That I needed to go back and go into the revolution and understand who she was and what had happened to her. So it's not, you don't decide I'm going to go back and do the Russian Revolution. I'm writing this story and this is what I need to do. I'm working on this noir story right now, and I need to figure out the facts of the background crime against which the forward story of the personal conflict will take place. And my God, I am reading about land development financing and stuff like I never thought I would need to know, never have needed to know. But this stuff has to be real or the other doesn't make any sense. I can't invent reality. I have to research reality. This is a genre question too, because people who I've given a lecture at UC Riverside low residency MFA program. And part of that is that for a day, you sit in a chair and people come up to you you get 20 slots, 15 minutes each, and people come up and tell you about their story, sit down and talk about their story. How do I solve this problem, that problem? And it's amazing how much you can get done in 15 minutes. But I found the one thing I have that I addressed over and over again is people who are writing in genre, the term genre fiction. So thriller, YA, sci-fi, noir, these are genres, which means they would be put on their own shelf in a library or in a bookstore. And people who like that kind of fiction will go right for that shelf. They're not looking in fiction, general literature. They'll go right to that. And the most important advice I can give you for doing genre fiction is to make sure the sensual reality is really, really present, really good landscape, really real. So especially if you're writing fantasy or sci-fi, it needs to be more real than a realistic contemporary novel or realistic contemporary story, because you're building the whole world in somebody's mind. It has to be so solid. It has to use those 3 levels of landscape we discussed. It has to really have a smell and a sound and be very tangible. Are you not afraid of getting it wrong in researching Russian history? Well, I had a background in Russian history, so I'm not afraid of getting it wrong. Not afraid of getting it wrong. I'm driven by the necessity of getting it right. No historian has read Marina M. and said that I got it wrong. When I wrote Paint It Black, set in the punk era, I actually had somebody who was sort of a punk princess read that book and pick out anything that was wrong. No, I'm a fanatic for getting it right. It doesn't frighten me. It's part of the deal. So here's hi, Barbara. Toby at this retreat wants to know, in relation to last week's Writing Wednesday, how do you identify good language and letting good language in your ears? How do you identify good language? There's a music to it. The verbs will be active verbs. There will be a lot of variation in the sentence structure. So it's not the same sentence over and over and over again. Subject, verb, object, subject, verb, object. There'll be a suppleness of the length. Sentences will change. The sentence structure will change. People will take care to pick words that kind of blow you away, little metaphors that just are incredible. A good writing will but especially somebody who thinks, is this the right word? Is this, there's got to be a better word than this. That's the work. How do you make this? Okay, you've said before, you don't plan your stories before writing them. How do you structure the story to work? What am I doing? Here we go. What am I doing? Stop it. There we go. How do you make the structure of the story work without planning? Well, a novel has room to move around a lot. So as a novelist, I have room to explore things and then come back. Um, and sometimes I walk into a wall and there's, 4 or 5 months worth of work that has to be pulled out, and you just have to do it. Short story, it's much easier to move the parts around, but in a short story, especially a genre story like a noir story, a little bit of plotting doesn't kill you. So I make it work, but it's a lot more. I work on kind of my gut reaction. Is this working? Is this not working? It's like when I can feel when it's not working, and then I search for the answer. Using the XYZ story structure that I talked about in one of these Writing Wednesday videos, situation that puts pressure on your character's salient features, where the interior contradictions, the situation that you set up puts pressure on those. And then where that goes will lead to a moment where they realize that they have to let go of certain aspects of their own makeup to accomplish whatever it is they're being confronted with. And tragedy is when the realization comes too late to do anything about it. So, yeah, I just can't, if I plot it, I don't want to do it. I have this, interior rebel that just won't go through the funnel, just won't do it. Okay, here's one. What do you think are the minimum basic elements for a flash piece? So this would be like the word exercise, 2 pages, double spaced. Basic elements would be whatever the corner of the handkerchief. That's why I use the word exercise, because in looking at the different associations you have with the word, picking the one that pulls you, that's the end of the handkerchief. And your attachment to the moment, your attachment to something in that is the basic element in a flash piece. You don't need to tell a complete story. You don't need to, because it's so short, you can really get pretty wild with them. And Barbara, how about hooks? Do you think a hook has to happen in the first couple of pages, or can an entire chapter form a hook? A hook, like a song hook. A hook is a question, maybe, a question that keeps the reader reading. They want to find out the answer to that question. And in Dostoevsky, they say Dostoevsky tied a girl to the tracks in the first 50 pages of every book he wrote. What's going to happen? Barn burning by Faulkner. This kid knows his father is a barn burner. He's a revengeful guy. Great story. He's a revengeful guy. Will he get caught? What will the kid do? It's putting pressure on the kid's central his salient characteristics is one, that he loves his father, or he respects his father, or is afraid of his father, his loyalty to his father versus knowing that his father is a bad man, so what's going to happen? So I think the hook doesn't have to, if it's a book, the hook is very gradual, builds, you'll have a sense in the first chapter that something is, going to happen. So it's really what you're calling a hook. I think of it as a doorway or a promise to the reader that something that, watch that guy because he's a bad guy. Something's going to happen. Or, this person is, really worried about something, so watch that. It's just telling the reader that you're going to watch for something. I get excited about things but bored quickly. How do I stay invested long enough to finish things? Write short. Write flash fiction. Write short stories. If you get bored easily, you're a short story writer. Oh boy. Okay. Well, very good. So in the absence of other questions, I'm going to be let's see, anything else I can answer? So in the absence of other questions, I will be back next week with Writing Wednesday and my book, Chimes of Lost Cathedral. Ooh, galleys came. Yay. So anybody want to review? If you want to review copy, if you have a blog or whatever, contact the publisher, Little Brown. And if you are want to support Writing Wednesday and support this whole venture, feel free to pre-order the book from wherever you buy books. It really helps to open big on the first week. Starting to get my first reviews. Pretty exciting. How do you run the story out? Can you give me an example? How do you run the story out? I'd like to answer that, but I'm not quite sure what that means to see how things turn out. It's just keep the pressure on. All right, well, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.